Hello, Internet. I apologize for the low production value, but if you're anything like me, you have, here we go, low production quality tilt. You have a Danelectro 5912. You'll notice very immediately if you have one of these guitars that I've already done a lot of changes. Yours does not look like this, but also yours doesn't sound like mine. And here's why. So the only string that I haven't done this yet to is this one. And I want you to pay attention. So if I have a downstroke on my pick, I get both notes, right? That's how a 12 string should sound. But if I have an up pick, it's almost the wah-wah trombone. Wah, 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 wah. Because it's set up, again, amazing work that we're going to do here. It's set up such that this string is slightly higher than its octave string. It's very hard to see, but you'll notice there's like a distinct element where this is a little bit higher than this. However, with a little bit of modification, the other strings, I'm doing all up picks there. And, all right, how was it that I was able to get all of my up picks to also be able to get the 12 string element? The answer is that I have created a height riser modification. So this piece of metal is normally flush with that piece of metal, but I have a little spacer that I made. How did I make it? I'm about to show you. The first thing we need to do is obviously loosen the string, but then there's a little screw right here, a small Phillips head. We're just going to unthread that. Set a needle nose, pull out the screw itself, and then needle nose again, et voila, we have ourselves a miniature riser which is in need of some extra footing on the bottom. So how is it that we get that footing? Well, this is awesome doing this in my kitchen. Let's see here, will this angle down enough? Maybe, we'll find out. I'm literally using a pepper mill here to hold my camera. So I took a candle that had long outworn its welcome, and I genuinely just set my little riser on top, and then I took a lighter and I just lit around the riser until it started to sink and was surrounded by wax. I then let the wax cool. Some of the wax had actually gotten over the top, so I had to like heat it again and then pull it back out with my needle nose. But you can see I've got a perfect wax relief for my riser. You can also see that, you know, I've got some epoxy here from, you know, the other risers that I've made, but I wanted you to be able to see how the last riser was made, because I'm pretty excited, because for as long as I've had this guitar, I've been saying to myself, oh man, I wish I could hear both notes on an up pick. So here I've got just good old-fashioned JB Quick epoxy. This will go not as fast as real time. I'll have to make an edit because effectively this does need time to harden. And because this is my last one, I know I don't need a lot, but I'm just going to give myself effectively something the size of a nice pearl. That's my hardener. And I'm literally just using like the top of like a juice cap here for this. Maybe just a little bit more. I'd rather have a riser that's slightly too high than one that's too small. I did make one that was too small before, and my too high one was easy to fix. I just sanded it down. But I don't want to have to do a remake of this last one if I can, even though I know it's going to be my shortest of the bunch because it's dealing with the smallest string size difference. All right, so we got this. Just gonna mix up my epoxy in here. You'll notice that a lot of it is already hardened inside the juice box top. I'm just going to put this in here. Fill up my mold as best I can. With a small amount of epoxy. I'm trying to make sure that I don't, scratch my wax. I'm trying to make sure that I keep that nice relief that I already made. I'm already regretting the small amount of epoxy that I made. I also know that, this is the least sized riser that I'm going to need. All right, let's hope I got it right. We're going to project optimism here. All right, so now that I've got the epoxy inside the well, let me refocus here. So again, I'm going to take my needle nose and I'm just going to plop this into my relief hole I've made, and I'm just going to push it down around all the edges until it kind of you can see some of it's now sort of squirting up along the sides, on the edges. And I know that that's effectively going to be what I need. So while I'm here, I'm just going to do some pre-clean. You can see I've got a lot of sort of pre-clean area here off to the side as I've been trying to scrape away excess. This excess is not a big deal, by the way. It comes off pretty quickly and easily. Even once it's dried. That was the end of the sentence that I was trying to say. So there we go. I've got my little piece sitting in its recess, and it'll take about 10 minutes for that to dry to the state for us to be able to remove it. So while we are waiting for that to dry, I want to talk about something else. I'm just going to pan this over as best I can. In the process of me raising the octave strings, it became pretty obvious to me, while playing, that the action was no longer at a good height. So one of the things that I'm going to endeavor to do is to actually lower it. The action was right for the octave string that was too low, and so I want to be able to drop my action so that I have kind of a consistent action from my low E to my top E. I looked at it last night, and I was about a 32nd of an inch on my high strings, but I was at about a 16th of an inch for my low strings. And so once you do this process, you're going to be apt to want to drop these down just a bit so that you're not having to push quite so hard on your fretboard in order to get the notes. Again, that's kind of like small potatoes compared to having to not have a note that you've wanted to have, but now I do. All right, so as I don't want to take the time to try and adjust my action on camera, I will talk about some of the modifications that I've made on this guitar because I'm really proud of it, because you probably have noticed this doesn't look like your 59-12. So I'm going to start at this end and work my way down. First distinction, I did switch to Grover locking rotomatics. The original ones that came with this guitar, solidly good tuners. I've actually resourced them or reused them on other guitars that didn't have nearly as good tuners. But for a 12 string, I absolutely needed to have locking rotomatics, so I switched those out. I'd like to talk about a mistake I made so that you don't make the same mistake. I actually switched out my nut with a bone nut because I have bone nuts on all of my other acoustics and electrics, save for one. And you could probably guess which one that is, Danelectro DC59, which has the very unique sound of this, I think it's aluminum nut. And when I switched to bone, I did that because I was trying to sound more like, a Gibson 12-string. That was a horrible, horrible idea. It robbed so much of the tone from this guitar. I had to go back to the metal nut. So you don't need to replace it. If anything, it's just a delightful sonic character that you shouldn't lose. All right, over here on the electronics side, you'll notice that almost nothing looks familiar. You're used to seeing like the switch down here. You're used to seeing only 2 pots, and that's the end of it. But I wanted this to feel more Les Paul-y, so I moved the switch up here. It's actually a different switch in order to be able to get it to fit in the recess. And then you're used to this pickup. I will admit, I was dumb to try and replace this. You'll notice that I have a completely different pickup down here. I went with 2 Kinman noiseless pickups, and I tried to source effectively the same sonics of the Jimmy Page, again, 1275, and what I ended up at the neck pickup was just sonically bad. It was so dead and lifeless that I just had to put this one back in. So I remember when I read the reviews for this guitar, they said, this pickup may be the best thing in the whole guitar. They're right. It's a great, great pickup. Now, before I move down, I also want to point out I got different screws for the pick guard because the ones that they had were dome-shaped, and as I would downstrum, I would often cut my finger on this one and this one. And so I got recessed screws and then used a small stripper reamer device, whatever, in order to carve out some shallow holes inside the pick guard so that I could have effectively something that wasn't cutting me up while I was playing. If I bring the camera here, you can see how like this is much more flush than what the original was, which really stuck out, and it was right inside the recess of the Phillips part where I was just cutting up my hand on playing. So that was another small but very necessary improvement. Here on the Kinman, there's really not a lot that I can say against the existing pickup. It's just when I got this guitar, it was quite noisy. And so I decided, okay, let me go with Kinman noiseless pickups. As it turns out, they didn't make that much of a difference. The biggest difference, which you can kind of see right here, all right, that's like one of the representatives of me having the entire internal cavity, all of this thing, copper plated with copper tape. So if you were to take the pickups out or anything out, you would see that this entire thing, stem to stern, is just copper, 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 copper in order to better shield it. And that has helped tremendously. All right, so when we get here to our knobs, my wife bought this for our 12th anniversary, which is pearl anniversary, so I wanted to have mother of pearl tops. But I also wanted to be able to have control over volume tone for each of the 2 pickups. So the thing is that, yes, I've got volume, but I've also got push-push ones for these 3. And what happens with this push-push is that this now turns the polarity of my neck pickup out of phase, so that when I'm in my middle position, I'm now out of phase between these 2, which is a delightful sort of snorkely sound. When I have this one, this is effectively the same as what you saw with the original Danelectro, where it is a coil tap. And so I am breaking up the humbucker, and I'm just using the back pickup in order to be able to get that feature. And then this is a series parallel switch for the guitar. Now, because of the way that this was wired, things were a little bit goofy, such that if I have this engaged, it doesn't matter what position I'm in. I just have now moved my pickups into I don't know. It's either series or parallel, whichever is the one that the guitar doesn't normally do. But now it's just, it doesn't matter. I can move this pickup switch anywhere, and I just have both pickups in this fashion. And conveniently, it is louder. So it's kind of like a mini onboard amplifier. When I engage this, no matter what position I'm in, even if I'm in the middle position, it is louder in this position than it is in this position. So that's, again, one of those, fun bits. Last but not least, over here on the output jack, if I could get my camera correct, I got one of those like multi-curved 1/4 inches that, it effectively is, it wraps around the tip sleeve cable. And I thought, like, hey, if this is great, I'll put these on all my guitars. I'll be honest, I'll say that I can't really tell the difference. But, maybe it helped cut down some of my noise just a little bit. But those are all the modifications that I made with this guitar. So it probably was very little surprise that I was going to go after this as well, because it was just that last little bit of I'm not able to get what I want out of this guitar. So at this point, I've been talking enough. I'd be willing to bet that I can pull out from our recess this little guy. All right, so here we go. And I have to kind of hold down the wax with one finger and pull up. There. All right, you'll see that I got, plenty of epoxy that, came with it, but all of that shaves off pretty easily. But now, more importantly, I have this little foot epoxy plastic. So at this point, just sort of go around, and this will involve using sort of the edge of the screwdriver. I'm not going to try and like cheat this for the camera. I'm just actually trying to do it for myself here. But generally just using the edge of the screwdriver to a bit of fingernail action as well to get the epoxy off, or at least the excess epoxy. Now just looking at this one, I can tell that I've got more of a foot than I need. I'm close, but I got more than I need, and so we're going to use some sandpaper to take out the excess. And granted, like a lot of this is just for like fit and finish. Like if you don't really care, you can leave the excess epoxy on. No one's going to probably be looking at your bridge and saying, oh, look at all that extra epoxy. But my wife's father-in-law, who's a big modeler, does a lot of model planes, and he has a statement that I think is actually a pretty good rule for working on any project. So if you work on model planes, you'll catch this phrase and understand it right away. It says, you paint the pilot's feet. What that means is, on a model airplane, you've got this little fake pilot that sits in the pilot seat. And it's always arranged in such a way that you would never, ever, ever see the pilot's feet. Like, you just can't. It's not a visible thing. Even if you had like the clearest of cockpits, the instrument cluster and so forth is always going to block the pilot's feet. But it doesn't matter. You know that the pilot's feet aren't painted. And so you can't say that you finished it correctly. And so while no one would ever actually look at my bridge and say, I know that this epoxy is here, and I want it to be nice and clean. So yeah, now I've got this nice little foot of fresh epoxy. And one of the ways that I've gotten sort of used to knowing that how much I need, if I go here, trying to get the focus on that, but like this E string one that I made, I don't know how, but I like lucked out at being the absolute perfect height right to start with. This is really hard to do while holding a camera. Oh, and I've also got the screw of the, uh, the height for the string, which, by the way, I was able to do that sort of while I was waiting for this to dry. And in the process, uh, full turn, full turn, full turn, 3/4 of a turn, and I was able to get the action of the guitar down to where I wanted it. But if I hold this here, you can see that, or at least you might be able to see, it's hard to tell what you can and can't see, but I'm almost the exact same height as this one. And that might have been great for maybe my A string, but I've got a significantly thinner string here than I do here. And so if I want to have my octave be the same height, I actually am going to need to shave this down a little bit. And that will be done with some sandpaper. So I'm just going to sand for a little bit. And this is fine grit sandpaper. Don't use anything that's, over heavy. That should be kind of obvious. I think this is like 500 grit sandpaper. Just gonna check this again against the other one. Yeah, so you can see I've brought it down a little bit, or hopefully you can see I've brought it down just that little bit, and that little bit is what I'm going to need for dealing with the shorter string. So now it's just a matter of effectively undoing what we've done. So one thing to note, these three, the screws are on the front end. There's actually two holes. You can see there's a front hole and a back hole. And these rear three or top three strings, they use the back hole screw. I can't really tell a difference. The important part is making sure that this part aligns with that part. Your intonation of the guitar is important. That's why all of this has been set up, for each individual string. But it doesn't do you any good if your octave's in a different location. So I can at least figure out that much. All right. The irritating thing is trying to do this and get the string out of the way that I'm trying to go underneath. Kind of pull this up. Getting a little bit of beginner's luck here. I'll take it. I'm just pushing this so that, again, that aligns with that. Get my screw. This is the part that is always the least fun because the string is always going to be in the way. Now I've dropped my screw, which is irritating. I'm going to do a bit of a switcheroo here. Use my needle nose to try and grab where the string is. See if I can pull it out of the way. And hopefully, with any luck, right now in the process of doing that, I definitely shifted this to where it needed to be moved. All right, let's try this again. Get over there. By bit, I'm just tightening it down and then making sure that it's aligned with the other one. I'll just drop that on. And I'm just going to double check. This actually looks to be a perfect height. Now we just do some tightening. Now that's a little bit tighter. Just take my hand, go over it, make sure that it feels about the same height. And I can actually tell that my octave string, the thing that I will point out, so this is a mistake that I had to learn the hard way. If you measure right at the, where the two are, you're going to be a little bit wrong, because what you need to account for is that all the way over here the strings are at a slightly different height. And you can see that if I were to put my finger here, like the string is actually a little low. So here, my octave string is lower than my root string on all the way across. You can actually see how the height is off. And so if I go over here, like my octave string should feel just a little bit high, but this is where I'm picking. I'm hitting from this spot. And so if this spot, it feels at about the same height, that's what I want it to be. How does that feel? It feels pretty damn good. It's a little high there, but... And I might find myself in a situation, you know what? This is a paint the feet moment, gang. I can feel that it is still just a little bit higher than I want it to be. Like, if I push down, you see that amount of distance? You know, I'm trying to sort of like make this as even. The fact that I can push that down that much, it's going to mean that it's going to end up blocking it in a way that I don't want. So I still need to sand this down a bit. So you don't need to watch that, but that's what I'm going to do for the next 5 minutes. Undo the string, bring it back up, and then sand a little bit more so I can get a better foot. All right, there we go. So I basically took it off, same way that you saw before. Take out the screw, move the string aside, pull the whole thing up, and then just went in after that with the sandpaper. So you can see it's like thicker here, a little bit thinner, a little bit thinner, a little bit thinner each time, or at least hopefully you can see that these feet are getting progressively shorter in order to account for the slightly thinner diameter of these strings. It's the fact that these two strings are the same diameter that they don't have to be adjusted, but yeah, just having that little teeny tiny foot in order to account for the distance between this one and this one. And when I put my finger on it in the area where I'm strumming, like I can feel that, I don't have a massive difference. I may find myself doing this a third time, actually. Yeah, like these I like, like there's, these two feel really good. I think I'm gonna sand actually this one and this one, just to be super, super, super on it, because I want my pick to be able to hit both this way and this way. And I don't want this blocking that or this blocking that. So we're going to do just a little bit more sanding. But, this is what we got ourselves into when we started this process, right? This shouldn't be a surprise. So, at this point, we're really just painting the feet. All right, so hopefully you all remember how it sounded before, but now I have. All on up picks. So that's how a 12 string is supposed to sound. Now it is. Just as much on the down as it is on the up. So there you go. If you were bothered by it, it is something you can solve at home. If you have a candle, a set of needle nose pliers, and some epoxy glue, and some fine grit sandpaper so that you can get them to be the right height when you're done. You can adjust this on your own. It's fantastic to be able to actually know. A lot of soloing, it's an up pick, and so to have both notes ringing true, and I just, for a quick moment, I'd like to point out, I did in fact go to the people at Danelectro 2 years in a row at NAMM to say, hey, could you do this? I'm hoping, of all things, that this video inspires them to do this as a standard feature, because it makes for a much better guitar. And I would think that's what they would want, better guitars. Yes, they'd have to have 5 different heighted ones, right? Because you've got, effectively 6 of the exact same height right now, and only 2 of them are right. And so you would have to make 5 of them individually, and that's the trick. But you could make all of the 5 heighted ones exactly as they are, but then just put, 4 pre-sized rubber buffers, hard, plastic buffers underneath, and you would accomplish the same end. So this is something that could be 3D printed, but I am so happy to have a 12 string that sounds like a 12 string now. So you can do it on your own. I hope you do. I hope this wasn't a total waste of your time. It's not a waste of mine. All right. Have a great day, Internet.